This is the Let's Go Win podcast with your host, J.M. Ryerson.
What is happening, you guys? Welcome back to the Tuesday tune-up on the Let's Go Win podcast, where we are here to help you be happy, healthy, and wealthy. Today, we're going to be focused on leadership, one of my favorite subjects. And the guest that I have on today, that's what she is great at. That's what she's been doing for the last 2 decades and doing a great job of it. Vanessa is president of Mosaic People Development. She is a seasoned leadership consultant, executive coach, and author of Mastering Leadership: What It Takes to Lead in Today's Fast-Paced World. With over 20 years of experience, she empowers clients to develop inspiring leaders through practical strategies. Her expertise has benefited top organizations like Campbell Soup, the United Nations, HelloFresh, and Bank of Montreal. Vanessa, how are you?
Hello, great to be here. How are you?
I'm great. You know, we got through a couple technical issues and we're off and rolling. What led you into leadership? Why is that the path that you chose? Because I know I love it. It's my favorite thing. But what was it for you that got you into it?
I love it too. It's my favorite thing on the whole world, in the whole world. In fact, it was quite funny. I live in Toronto and I was on the subway. This is before the pandemic. And I bumped into a friend of mine and I was reading a leadership book on the subway. And she said, I can't believe it. The leadership coach and consultant is reading a book on leadership. I'm like, yes, because it's my passion. So how did it become my passion? Well, I've been developing leaders for over 20 years. I worked at a consulting company for many years where I developed leaders across the globe in many different industries, and just have always been passionate about it because I realized very early on working with leaders that leaders really set the tone. So leaders really make or break people's experiences at work. So that was something that I'd been doing very successfully for 10 years. And then I had one of those pivotal moments where I had the worst leader of my entire life. And this leader, I went from someone who's really high performing, who loved her job, loved my team, loved the business, to someone who was depressed and unmotivated and really anxious about coming into work. And the only thing that changed was the same company, same person, same job, was my leader. So when I had that experience, it really took I'd never had a bad leader before. I had mediocre leaders, but I'm almost talking like someone who's almost like a bully. So when I had that leader, Jam, it really changed my perspective on how critically important leadership is.
Let's dive into that, if you will, because I've personally left companies because of leaders. It has happened.
Yeah.
And it's often, to your point, it's not the company, it's not the job. It literally comes down to, if you don't believe in the leadership, whether it's above you, even in cases with me where we've been peers, and because the leadership philosophy was so misaligned, it doesn't work. So what was it with this leader? What were they doing? And what were some of the attributes? Because that's what I want to figure out, is why were they so bad? And so we don't create some of these leaders and people don't have to leave and be unmotivated, all the things that you went through.
Yeah. I call leaders, there's sort of 2 categories: conscious and unconscious. So the conscious leaders are the ones that are very aware of their behavior and how it impacts the people around them. The unconscious leaders are not. They go around their day, they have objectives, they have goals, they're moving things forward, they're action oriented. They have no idea that when they're maybe yelling at someone in a meeting, which happened to me, or taking away responsibilities that someone's been in charge of for a long time, that happened to me, with this one leader, for example, I sat on a committee for a long time and had built this committee and really cared about it. This group within the organization took me off, put her on. So all of these things happened. Oh, another thing she did was, picture a bowling alley, right? So the office that we worked in had like a very long hallway, and it had a nice office with a window. It wasn't big, it wasn't fancy, but it was my office with a little window. Moved me right to the end of that hallway, long hallway, to a little corner office with no window, where I was isolated from my team. And so just things like that kept happening. And she was completely unconscious of how the decisions she made and her behavior impacted the people around her.
Yeah. So, would we call this emotional intelligence, self awareness? I mean, these are some of the trendy terms, if you will. But I mean, ultimately, either she had a real challenge with you, but I'm guessing it wasn't just you that felt this way. I'm guessing that
Of course.
she, yeah, tell me more about that. Did
Of
she
course.
continue
Yeah.
to violate others?
Yeah. In fact, what's kind of sad about that whole situation is I've been there 5 years and I actually love the organization, but because of this person, I left.
Mhm.
She didn't last more than about 6 or 8 months after I'd left because I was not the only one and people were complaining. And so she was ousted from the organization. So that's kind of the sad part is that often really good, caring people leave organizations because of the way they've been treated by their leader. So, yeah, to answer your question, I do think it's a combination of self awareness and emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is quite a broad topic, but in a nutshell, I define it as how your emotions impact you and the people around you. So, yeah, it is a combination of her EQ and her self awareness for sure.
Yeah, and I just what you want to do, or at least the way I've felt in these positions, is you want to be able to talk to them and provide feedback and say, "Look, you're not a bad person. You're trying your best." But I'm guessing again. I'll let you speak to. Was she even open to having these discussions, or was this just you're crazy for even thinking I'm not a fantastic leader?
So, what's so interesting about that question is I teach crucial conversations,
Hmm.
feedback, how to give crucial conversations. I crucial conversationed her till the cows come home, but nothing happened because she lacked that self awareness. It was in one ear and out the other.
Yeah. No, it's too bad. But let's
Yeah.
talk about some positive stuff. One of the
Yes.
things that you deal with, or you're kind of the topic, is what it takes to go from being a doer to
Yep.
being a leader. Now,
Mhm.
I am a big fan of everyone is a leader in some
Yes.
part of their life. But tell me what you mean by going from being a doer to a leader. What does that look like?
For sure. So I completely agree with you. There's one of my favorite books is called The Leadership Pipeline. And what they talk about in that book is the fact that there's actually different passages of leadership. So the first passage of leadership is leading self. So this is someone in an organization who doesn't necessarily have direct reports, but they need to be responsible for their own goals. They need to live the organizational values. They need to be a team player. So yeah, that is the first level of leadership is self-leadership. What I'm talking about is moving from a doer to a leader is that next level. And so that's the first time that you have direct reports, right? Because when you're at the level one of leadership, you are a doer. You've got a lot of objectives. You're usually a subject matter expert. You're really good at your job. And it's often those people who get promoted into leadership roles. The problem is they get promoted into leadership roles without any training or
Hmm.
coaching on how to be a leader. And so that's what I do. It's that close that gap between being level one leader, so that passage one leader and passage two leader, when you do get direct reports, your job, quite frankly, changes.
It is pretty fascinating, and I don't know if this is because back in the 80s, 90s, even early 2000s, you just the meritocracy. If you were a good performer, now we're going to put
Right.
you a leader, but we're not actually going to train you. You just go figure it out. And it's fascinating. Everything we talked about earlier, people leaving, not
Yes.
having, morale being down, even performance obviously will start to sag based on this leadership. Are we just still catching up that the curriculum of leadership? Because this isn't something that we were taught in school. And I remember going through the majority of my career until I really started taking the reins and talking about leadership. This wasn't like, all right, welcome to being a leader. Let's show you how to kind of do it. Why are we so far behind the times on this?
Mhm. Well, the data shows only 5% of organizations actually have strategic leadership training in place because they understand that it's a different job and you need to upskill people, right? Think about it this way. I happen to have a 16-year-old, right? If you have a 16-year-old and they're learning to drive a car, you don't just give your 16-year-old the keys and say, off you go drive. No, they have driver's ed lessons and they have to take online courses right? So it's a whole process before they eventually can drive on their own. Well, it should be the same with leaders, but just most organizations don't understand that. They know they have a leadership gap to fill. So they plug in the most efficient and effective individual contributor who's at that passage one of leadership, but they're putting them into a different job.
Yeah, and what's crazy to validate the 5%, I walk into companies all the time and I'll ask a very specific question. What's your leadership philosophy as a company? And typically I get blank stares. And it's like, this is literally going to drive whether we're going to succeed. Your company's going to grow faster. You're not going to have people wanting to leave. So it's one of those things where it's like, why is it not a top priority? And so talk to me about what you're doing to kind of solve some of this with those 5% that are interested. And hopefully we can talk to the other 95% to say, hey, let's look at some curriculum here, guys.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a great question to ask. I find most people can't answer that question either around their leadership philosophy. Some people do have values, and maybe one of their values is around leadership, demonstrating leadership. But the reality is, people don't understand what core competencies are for leadership. People call leadership skills soft skills, which is, by the way, one of my biggest pet peeves.
Me too.
Yes, we align on that. Let's drink to that. Because what's soft about it? What's soft about it? I call them, whenever someone says soft skills, I say, pardon me, maybe we call them core leadership competencies or core leadership skills, because there's nothing soft about knowing how to grow your team, building a high performing team, coaching people, giving feedback, managing conflict. Like, those are really tough skills. So what I usually do when I work with a client is I say, I've been doing this for 20 years. You don't need to figure it out. I've got a system. I've got a model. I'm going to share it with you. Let me take that pressure off, because most people just don't know.
Well, and to your point, crucial conversations. Let's just go with this one, because again, at what point is this soft, right? The only way it becomes soft is not being a complete dick in having this conversation, right? Like, if you're having a crucial conversation, the truth is, if you're willing to have it, means you care about the other human being. Maybe that's where it gets the soft. But having these tough conversations, these crucial conversations, I think most people avoid them because they're frightened of it. So let's focus on this one for a second. If you wish everyone that is in leadership and they have that crucial conversation that needs to happen, what would you tell them to do it in terms of prepping and what to look out for, so that these conversations aren't scary, but rather they're helping productivity, they're helping communication?
Sure. First of all, I think it's your mindset, right? So you have to understand the consequence of not having the crucial conversation. So what could the consequence be of not having it? Well, first of all, the person's behavior is never going to change. So I actually feel like you're being mean by not giving somebody feedback. Let's say somebody has a lot of errors in their work, right? And it's not looking good in terms of their professionalism. If you don't give them feedback on that, they're going to continue, right? Let's say I just spoke to a client before this, and we were talking about, she really wants to promote one of her leaders, but the executive team doesn't see him as someone who contributes in meetings. Said, well, you're going to have to tell him that the executive team really only looks at him based on his behavior, right? Their perception of him is based on his behavior. So if he wants the senior team's perception, the executive team's perception to change, he has to change his behavior. If she doesn't give him that feedback, he's never going to be seen as up to par for the executive team, right? So number one is mindset. You have to understand, you're being mean if you don't give people feedback, because they're never going to grow. And likely it's a blind spot. They likely don't even know that this behavior isn't serving them.
Yeah, and I equate that back to my coaches in high school and college. They always said, look, if I'm not talking to you, that's when you should be concerned, because that means I have lost all faith and courage in you. So I absolutely love that. I want to talk about one of the things I think leaders really could improve on, and that's when you say the word meetings. And we've seen the eye roll. Oh, I got to go through this meeting, but they don't have to be bad. In fact, they should be a great opportunity for everybody to reconnect, to make sure we have adequate support. Do you have a leadership, whether it's a philosophy, a cadence, Do you, when it comes to meetings, do you teach a specific way that you like meetings to go?
I do, and I can share a resource with people, but two things that I like to say about meetings. The first thing I like to say about meetings is cut them in half. So people have 1 hour meetings. Why are they on 1 hour meetings? Right? Cut them in half. If you have a 1 hour meeting, my challenge for you is to make it 30 minutes. If it's 30 minutes, my challenge for you is to make it 15 minutes. So that's the first thing I tell leaders. The second thing I tell leaders is have an agenda. Whoa, like blow my mind. People have an agenda, right? It amazes me how many leaders don't have an agenda. So, right at the top, what the purpose is. Write your 5 bullet points that you need to have discussed in the meeting, and then time it. Give each point like each section. Let's say 5 things to talk about. Give each 5 minutes. If things come up, put them on a parking lot. A parking lot, as you probably know, is a tool which allows you to write down all the things that you need to talk about that aren't on the current agenda. So it's really about, again, focus and process. I think one of the things that I don't see enough for leaders is preparedness. I don't see leaders preparing enough. If you literally took that 5 minutes to plan your meeting and prepare for it strategically, it would save you so much time down the road. And then the resource I was going to share is called The 6 Thinking Hats by Edward de Bono. I don't know if you're familiar with that tool.
No.
But Edward de Bono is a PhD. He's written over 60 books. He studied as a neurologist the brain for many years, and he looked at the fact that we think in different modes at different times. And he has the most incredible meeting management tool that I've ever seen called The 6 Thinking Hats. And so that's definitely a resource that I would recommend. You can go on YouTube and just type in the 6 Thinking Hats, and you'll learn how to manage and use this tool. I use it when I facilitate meetings. In fact, I ran a strategic planning meeting for a group of leaders in the construction industry recently, and I taught them the 6 Thinking Hats methodology. And what one of the leaders said to me, he said, Vanessa, in half a day, what we did using that methodology is what typically takes us 2 years to do.
Wow.
So don't reinvent the wheel. Use tools and facilitation tools, for example, that are already out there.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of that as well. In fact, Michael Hyatt is kind of the cadence I've used for meetings, the AEIO. But to the whole idea, I love how you said, look, cut it in half, state your intent straight out of the gate, and be prepared. But the parking lot, this is something that I think often drags meetings on. Some idea goes, oh, let's keep talking about, no, we can talk about this for the next meeting.
Yes.
Get prepared, go talk about it so you can come back and actually have something profound to bring to the table, not just purging whatever feelings you have about it in the moment.
Right.
I want to ask you just your overall, the 1 to 3 attributes. If you were to say a perfect leader looks like this, and obviously it's not a man or it's not a woman, it's not tall or short, none of that matters, but there are certain attributes that I think great leaders possess. What have you seen, Vanessa, that you're like, yep, they nailed it?
Well, I don't think, to me, it's not personality traits, because I've seen leaders with all sorts of personality traits be successful: introvert, extrovert, task-oriented, relationship-oriented, analytical. I've seen all different personality types be successful. But for me, it's really the 3 pillars of leadership success. Okay, we're going to go back to pillar 1 is know yourself. That's that self-awareness piece. Pillar 2 is manage your team. You have to know how to coach, develop your people, give feedback, have crucial conversations. And then the 3rd pillar is lead your business. You have to know how to lead and manage change, prioritize, delegate, execute strategically. So those are more, that's the way I look at it, Jam, more in terms of the pillars of leadership success rather than traits.
Love that. Now I want to ask you the soft skill. What is your thoughts with vulnerability in leadership, and how can we use it to our advantage to really be authentic and truly be vulnerable with our team? What are you seeing in the workplace today?
Well, I love Brene Brown's work. I think she revolutionized the world of leadership when she came out with her work on vulnerability. All the leaders that I work with, they have to go on YouTube and listen to Brene Brown's TED Talk on vulnerability, because it's life-changing. Because prior to Brene Brown's work, we all thought that it was inappropriate to be vulnerable with your team. And now it's encouraged. And what I help leaders understand is the difference between some leaders feel a little bit nervous when they hear that word vulnerability. And what I have to say to them is, it doesn't mean you're sharing your deepest, darkest secrets with your team. What it means is it's okay to say, I don't know the answer to that. Or we just had a failure here. We need to look and take some time together and debrief. Don't sweep it under the rug. Or vulnerability could look like, you and I have had a little bit of conflict. Can we take a minute to sit down and talk about it? So it's not sharing your deepest, darkest secrets. It's just having the courage to share your failures, to talk about them, to be brave, to have crucial conversations. That's what it means to me.
Yeah, I love that. I can't believe it's 20 minutes of run by already. Anything I didn't ask you that I should have known enough that you want to share with the audience before we kind of wrap up?
Well, I think that one of the things that I'm really focused on with leaders is really building their confidence. Because I know, because a lot of people get promoted into leadership roles without a lot of development, I would say, number one, take it upon yourself. There's lots of podcasts like this one on leadership. There's lots of books written. But the key thing that you have to remember about confidence is the willingness to try. So you have to be willing to try something. And let's go back to the example of feedback. Let's say it doesn't go well. It's okay. I want you to go out there. I want you to try new things. If it doesn't go well, debrief, whether it's with someone else or in your own mind. Just say to yourself, okay, wait a minute. I gave that feedback. It felt a little bit stilted. What did I learn from it? What will I do differently next time? So that's sort of the piece that I'd like to leave everyone with is try new things.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Vanessa, if people want to connect with you, Mosaic People Development, where's the best place to find you online?
So you can find me on my website, Mosaic People Development. You can just Google that or go to mosaicpd.com or link in with me. I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn as well.
Awesome. Your work is so important. I love how you're bringing to the table. Look, guys, these aren't soft skills. These are leadership requirements. Yes. It's yes. Beautiful. Thank you for coming on. Leadership is such a huge part of everyone's world. And yet, to your point earlier, it's not focused on perhaps the way that you and I would like to see it. So I just love the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time today and for a wonderful conversation.
It's truly my pleasure. You guys, look, leadership, she started with self. So everyone listening is a leader at some degree, whether that's at home, your business, and starting with number one. Go check out Mosaic People Development. Go check out her book. She knows what she's talking about. She even started with the crappy leader and what not to do. Absolutely brilliant. Share this out with somebody. Until next time, remember, your mindset matters. I appreciate you all. Thank you so much for listening. If this content is delivering value to you, please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review us. That helps us build this community, and that is what we are all about. Building this community as big as we can, helping as many people as we can, and deliver as much value as possible. Be sure to head over to letsgowinpodcast.com for information on my coaching courses, and make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Let's Go Win 365. Let's go win and transcend in life.
This is the Let's Go Win podcast with your host, J.M. Ryerson.